Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney says U.S. President Donald Trump has congratulated him on his party's election victory and agreed to meet him in the near future. Carney said the U.S. president agreed on the importance of Canada and the U.S. working together as independent sovereign nations. On Monday, Carney led the Liberal Party to an upset victory in a campaign dominated by concerns over Trump's trade war and threats to annex Canada. Andrew Coyne is a columnist for the Globe and Mail newspaper and joins me now for more. Andrew, welcome. Donald Trump called Mark Carney to congratulate him. That's no longer a given these days. And the two plan to meet, possibly at a G7 summit in Canada in June. You know, voters seem to like Carney's tough talk approach. How effective will it be in dealing with Trump?
Well, you never know. He's a very unpredictable character. He's not particularly necessarily operating on a rational plane. He does tend to assess people, I think, almost by, I think he uses the phrase often, he's from central casting. And it is noteworthy the change in tone, that the way that he talks about him. And I have to put it down to the fact that he looks like a central banker. He's got that kind of bankerly demeanor. It's clear that Donald Trump never much cared for Justin Trudeau. They were as opposite as you could possibly imagine. So you wouldn't think that world events would be shaped by such trivial concerns, but then we're talking about Donald Trump.
Carney's Liberal Party failed to win an outright majority in Parliament. What does that mean for how he's going to govern and the concessions he's going to have to make?
Well, he can't govern as if he had a majority. He's going to have to work with other parties. I think the public is in a very strange mood right now. This has been a very scarring experience to find out that your nearest neighbor and closest ally has suddenly, in effect, turned on you, that you can't really count on them as necessarily being your allies, certainly under Donald Trump and even under his potential successors. So people are looking, feel like they're in a national crisis, and they're looking for their leaders, their political leaders, to behave rather differently than just politics as usual. So there'll be a premium on getting along with each other. He's also in a very strong position in that he only needs the support of one of the other parties to govern. He can play them off against each other. Nobody wants to go to another election anytime soon. So as long as he looks like he's not trying to rub their faces in it, as long as he looks and they look like they're putting the country's interests before their own narrow partisan concerns, I think this will actually be a more stable arrangement than some people think it would be.
Before Trump took office, Canadians were more worried about inflation, immigration, other concerns. Those concerns ostensibly still exist. How is Carney going to navigate them any better than his predecessor, Justin Trudeau?
Well, that's an open question. You know, there was really sort of two elections. The Conservatives ran against the Liberals. They ran against the Liberal record, and that had done very well for them up until the Trump thing blew onto the scene. They were 25 points ahead in the polls. It looked like they were cruising to an easy victory. But as the campaign wore on and Trump wasn't sort of in the news and in our faces every day, these issues started to come back to the fore. We've had a terrible record on our economy over the last 10 years. These housing and affordability questions that are cropping up in so many other countries have been very much at the forefront. And one of the concerns that people had and that caused the Conservatives to come back up in the polls towards the end of the campaign was Carney really proposing anything that much different than his predecessor? I think people have more respect for his economic know-how. You don't get to be a central banker for two different countries without knowing a thing or three, but the proof is going to be in the pudding. He's going to actually have to deliver better results than the previous government did, and we'll have to just wait and see on that.
Andrew, this election saw more than 2/3 of voters cast a ballot. That's the biggest turnout in more than 30 years. You've just published a book called The Crisis of Canadian Democracy. Does this election and that kind of turnout, does it help resolve those issues that you're worried about?
I don't think so. This was a very strange election. For one thing, in recent decades, the vote has been increasingly dispersed in Canada between 4 or 5 or 6 parties, and we still have a first past the post system that really isn't designed for that. It's more designed for the two-party system. This election, everything surged back towards the two main parties because of this crisis. We got a bit of a surge, as you say, in voter turnout. But I think once the crisis is passed, we're going to be faced with some of the same questions that we've had: is how functional is our parliament? How meaningful is the role of members of parliament? Does our electoral system match the actual realities on the ground of the types of political parties that we have? And I don't think we've really begun to address those questions. We'll still be dealing with this immediate crisis, and then we'll wake up when the crisis has passed and say, have we really resolved any of those issues?
All right, that's Andrew Coyne with the Globe and Mail. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
All right, for more on this, let's go to journalist Emily Ragabir in Toronto. Hi, Emily. Ultimately, both of these candidates had to really push back against Trump, and it's clear that voters were mobilized by concerns over the U.S. To what extent does that make Carney's work easier in the next government?
Well, Mark Carney is just short, literally 3 seats from a majority government. So he really does have what's being called a durable minority government. I mean, he has managed to flip this party, turn this party on its head in just a matter of weeks. If you and I had this conversation 4 months ago, we were looking down the barrel of a conservative majority. Then just weeks ago, we were looking down the barrel of a truly a majority liberals. But then, the conservatives tightened the race, and here we are with a minority government. But he does have a seismic one. And, Mark Carney did reiterate in his speech to Canadians yesterday and his supporters that this is really a moment to unify the country. It was a historic 36-day campaign. Everybody, hitting the campaign trails with their platforms. But really, this is a moment. Canada has not faced a threat like this in modern history from its closest partner and closest ally, being that the United States. And so, Mark Carney really does have the power. He really is he's a firm, he's shown in his 9 days as Prime Minister, he's shown he has a very firm demeanor. He won't bow down to Donald Trump, and he has incredible ideas for this country domestically.
Right, and we saw there the Conservatives saying that they would work with Carney on some of these foreign issues, that they would also hold his government to account. How dangerous are the domestic issues for Carney that boosted Conservatives before Trump's arrival, from inflation to immigration? Will these still play a role going ahead?
You're absolutely right. I mean, listen, we are dealing with the biggest foreign threat from the United States president. But when I've spoken to voters of every demographic, so many of them did talk about the domestic issues, like you just mentioned, the cost of living, healthcare, affordability. The Conservatives really did manage to open the doors to young people. It was a historic turnout here in the province of Ontario, in the city of Toronto, where I'm at. This is a strong ground historically for the Liberals, and the Conservatives did manage to break through that. Nonetheless, Mark Carney's main priority right now is to extend that olive branch across the aisle. Remember, Pierre Poilievre, the leader, or now former leader of the Conservatives, he lost his seat. So while he did open up more conservative support across the country in main Liberal strongholds, he has now lost his seat, and the Conservatives really need to find a way how to go forward with this government the way it is formed now.
So Poilievre's future appears to be in question. What about his brand of populism that mimics that of what we've seen from Trump? Do you expect that to be a major factor going ahead in Canada?
Great question. I mean, before the Trump effect, this trade war, the sovereignty threats of making Canada the 51st state, Pierre Poilievre was very like-minded to Donald Trump. He posed his campaign saying, Canada first, the way Canada strong, the way Donald Trump used the MAGA line, make America great again, America first. So he had so much likeliness. But of course, when Donald Trump started to make these threats, he had to pivot. The Conservatives made an entire platform against Justin Trudeau. Their entire mandate was against Justin Trudeau. And when these threats came in from the United States, he had to pivot and make his entire mandate change. So it does signal that the Conservatives still do have a stronghold in this country, but it was no match for the threats from the United States president, which ultimately catapulted Mark Carney and the Liberals to this historic win.
All right, that's journalist Emily Ragabir in Toronto. Thank you very much.